Alrighty, guys, hello and welcome back to the show. So today, I'm going to take a little walk down memory lane. I started getting serious about Forge Alliance Forever and actually, playing the game again seriously about a year ago. So one of the things that I wanted to do, just kind of hit me, was I want to go back and think about and look at the things that I learned over my last year playing Forge Alliance Forever. Not all of them are going to be gameplay mechanics. Some of them are going to be mental aspects. Some of them are going to be more character qualities. But yeah, I'm feeling introspective, so I'll get a little real with you guys on this video. This isn't going to be like 3 easy steps to getting better at Forge Alliance Forever, but I'm feeling introspective about what this game has taught me and about what the last year has taught me, especially things that you can apply to other areas of life. So first, I'm going to start with mental attributes. To play this game, and there's really 2 things that fall into this category, but to play this game, you've really got to be able to tune out a lot of the crap that people throw at you in games. Calling you a noob, telling you to die, telling you to get cancer, uninstall FAF. I've heard and seen it all in various casts, and a lot of it's been said to me as well in these games. And seeing as how FAF doesn't have an ability to mute chat, hint, hint, if that's at all possible, devs, that would be amazing. You got to learn to kind of live through it, and you got to learn to bounce back. And since I started as a negative 700, whenever I got into FAF whenever I got back into FAF about a year ago, you get kind of the worst of it, especially if you're that low on the rating scale. I played FAF like a handful of games several years ago, and just absolutely got destroyed. And about a year ago, I just decided that, I was going to figure out this game because I've been watching Guile casts and I really wanted to get into this game and this community. And, the community can be a little harsh sometimes, especially if you're a very, very low rated player. So thick skin is really, really important in this game. And even if you get to the point where I'm at, where you're, like 1100, 1200, like, you're an aggressively middle of the road player, you still get called an idiot and a noob all the time. So thick skin is really important. And this ties into kind of the second point, which is you need an ability to reset your brain, reset your mind. If you're in a funk or if you're losing games, things like that, in order to, be successful at really anything. But, in this game, for the purposes of this video, you need an ability to just take a step back and breathe. And if you're like me, I get into a downward spiral sometimes where I get down on myself, so because of how badly I'm playing, so then I play worse, so then I get more down on myself, and then I play worse, etc., etc. It's a very destructive cycle that you can kind of get yourself into. This kind of happened to me in the Teammate and Me tournament. I felt like I was playing bad. I knew I was playing bad, and so I played worse. And that was kind of the first probably 2 series that I played. I didn't really feel like I was playing very well, and so I felt bad about it, and then I played worse. And in between those games, like, I remember just like we took about 30 minutes between the second series and the third series, and I just took a second, like walked around, just breathed. For me, exercise kind of helps like reset the brain, so like I did some push-ups, some sit-ups, like things like that. So whatever you can do to kind of just reset the way that you actually approach the game, or approach like your mindset around it, is going to be extremely helpful for you. And while this is a video game, there are a lot of parallels here with athletics. The same applies for swimming, running, other sports as well. I draw a lot from swimming, just from my past as a swimmer. But if you're not in a good headspace, you will not perform well. So I could have done the exact same workouts as another guy that's standing next to me on the blocks. We could be wearing the same suit. We could have had the same taper. We can literally be carbon copies of each other. And if the other dude or dudette that I'm racing against is in a good headspace and I'm feeling really down on myself that day, that person is going to beat me every single time, even though from a physical fitness standpoint, we are at the same level. And the same is true with Forge Alliance Forever. If you're letting yourself get into a destructive cycle from a mental aspect and let that take a hold of you, you will not perform as well in games as you would if you just take a step back and breathe a little bit and kind of reset your mindset. That being said, though, this also kind of ties into the last point, which is this is a game. Like, it's not, FAF is not life. It's not something that you're going to make a living off of. It's not something that I'm going to make a living off of. It's just something that we do for fun. And so take it for fun. Like, if you're not having fun, stop, take a breath, walk around, go for a run, play with your dog, play a different game, whatever it is. Don't let yourself get into this kind of destructive mental cycle just because you're losing at a video game, for God's sake. Like, this is meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyable. It's not meant to be something that you get super down on yourself about. All right, so that's enough introspection on the mental aspect. Let's get into a couple of gameplay mechanics. There are three primary things that I've learned. I mean, there are a ton of different smaller things that I've learned, but the three biggest things that I've learned are first, changing the way that I did like my entire unit production. So if you go back and watch like a lot of my earlier games, like from 8, 9, 10, actually maybe even a little bit longer, I was in the old apartment at that point. Like, if you go back to watch some of my games from like September, October of 2020, I did a very spread out production plan where I would have only like 2 factories in my main base, and then I would build like satellite production facilities pretty much everywhere. This really helped me from an organizational standpoint, but it's pretty harmful for you because it leaves you really vulnerable for the early areas of the game until you can get that production up. Whereas if you go for centralized production, you can just like start building it immediately. Engineers don't have to get to a place, your commander doesn't have to get to a place to start building these factories. It also has the added advantage of you can grab units that are going to a particular rally point and redivert them because all of your production is in your main base. So if your power grid comes under threat, you have units right there to respond. And it's just it's a much more agile way to actually play the game. The second is radar / scouting. And these are things, especially scouting, that I still need to do a lot better on. But understanding what your opponent is actually doing or what is going to be brought to bear against you is extremely important. And radar and scout planes are definitely good ways to do that. On the radar side of things, a really good tip trick that I've picked up very recently over the last like month or so is just every time you have an expanding engineer, like if you take, say, Open Palms, for example, you've got that central starting location and then one starting location to your south, another one to your north if you're in a ladder match. The engineers that are expanding to those secondary starting locations end their build queues with a radar and a factory. That's a good way to just make sure that you have at least some radar coverage over the entire map, and you can understand whether there's a bomber that's harassing you, whether there are units that are coming in so that you can divert units appropriately, etc. From a scouting perspective, the best thing to do is just try and think every 3 or 4 minutes or so, just send a scout plane over the enemy base. That way you can see whether or not your opponent's going for T2, whether he's going for a comm upgrade, how many T2 mexes he has, etc., etc. All of these things can influence your overall strategy. And that's a really good segue to my third point here, which is have a plan. So whenever I first started playing the game, seriously, like back in, I think it was June of 2020 was whenever I first got back into it. My plans were to the extent of build a bunch of factories, as many T1 units as possible, and overwhelm the enemy commander. And while that works relatively well at lower skill levels, now that I've gotten up to about 1K ladder, I've realized that you really need to have a much better plan as far as like what you're going to do, other than just throw as much shit into the field as you can and hope that it turns out and hope that it goes for the best. Sometimes that does work, and I do sometimes have success with it, but it's something that you need to think about. And it doesn't have to be like a super prescriptive plan, but have like a loose idea of what you want to focus on, whether that's a quick upgrade to T2 land if you're playing Seraphim, whether that's controlling the air and going for a quick T3 air rush, whether that's going for an early gun comm upgrade, like etc. And make sure that your build order actually supports your plan. So for example, if you're going for an early gun comm, build 3 or 4 more power generators because you're going to need it to fuel that comm upgrade. Actually, you're probably going to need more than 3 or 4. You get the idea. Adapt your build order to fit the plan that you want to incorporate into the game. It is important to me to note, though, that no plan is going to survive contact with the enemy. So it's important to have a strategy going in, but it's also important to be able to take that strategy and subtly or sort of shift it depending on what your opponent is doing. Like if you're going for a fast T3 air upgrade and you have 4 land factories and your opponent is coming at you with a ton of T1 spam, might be a good time to think about either dropping down some point defense or adding a 5th land factory, something like that, just to keep yourself alive. So keep that in mind. Even though you have a strategy that is going into the game, it is a loose strategy and you will have to potentially deviate depending on what your opponent is going to do. But just make sure that you stick to that overall plan. Like if you're going to go for fast T3 air to push out a strat, to take out all of his mexes, make sure that you stick to that. So the last area is more of a character quality section. And over the last year, specifically with regards to Forge Alliance Forever, I've really learned that humility is something that is extremely important in this game. Because, well, this is a side note. I actually didn't have this in my script or in my notes that I'm reading off of. But if you're not humble, if you're an arrogant asshole, everybody's gonna hate you and nobody's gonna want to help you. But humility is one of the things that I've learned over the journey in this channel. If you go back to some of my earlier videos, I was very, very full of myself. Even thinking that doing like replay reviews and things like that, I thought I was like a really, really good player. And I think that I'm pretty middle of the road. There are a lot of players out there that can absolutely destroy me. And I get reminded of that regularly whenever I load into a game. But I was way too full of myself and thought that I was pretty good at the game. Now I think that I'm pretty good at the game, but I think that I have a ton to learn, like way more to learn. Like if you think about like knowledge of FAF as in like degrees or like grade levels, let's say I might have just like gotten into middle school, which is what we in the States use for like 6th through 9th or 6th through 8th grade. I don't even know if that's true for all of the United States, but that's what my school looked like. Was 6th through 8th grade was what's called middle school. Then you go to high school after that. So I mean, I don't even think I've graduated middle school as far as like what I know of the game. Whereas previously I was like, yeah, I got a high school. I've definitely got my high school diploma and I'm definitely going to college and maybe a junior, senior in college. Don't have my graduate degree yet, but I'm definitely getting there. And boy, was I ever wrong. And this channel definitely taught me that. The game definitely taught me that. The Teammate and Me tournament taught me that as well. There's just being humble with this game is, I think, incredibly important to get better. Because if you're humble and you recognize that you're not a great player, people are going to want to help you. I want to help people. If somebody is worse than me and they are like, hey, I would really like your opinion on this particular game, I don't really know what went wrong, I'm more than happy to give them my opinion. But if somebody is like, I'm God's gift to this game and I'm right and nobody else is right, then I'm going to be much more hesitant to actually give them a leg up. So think about that as you're going through the game. Anyone who says that they know everything about this game is probably full of crap. I would even say that the pro players out there, Jagged, Tagada, Nexus, Blackheart, all of these guys out there, while they are exceptionally good players and can take me to school, I would bet that all of them would say that they don't know everything about the game and are played perfectly every single time. They make mistakes too, just like we do, even though I make way more mistakes than somebody like Tagada does. Tagada definitely makes mistakes. So does Jagged, and you can see that on some of his streams as well. He's very introspective about his mistakes, and I love seeing that about, especially with the very high-level players, about how they can still be critical of themselves and they don't just blame everybody around them for losing a game or anything like that. So anyway, humility, very, very important, and I've learned a lot of it over the life of this channel. So let's wrap this up. I've been blabbering for a while here. I've been feeling really contemplative lately, and I wanted to reflect on this last year since I got serious with FAF. For those of you guys who have been with this channel since the beginning, thank you guys so much. You mean the world to me. And sorry for getting a little real with you guys on this one, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys learned something, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.